A short time ago, the U.S. military carried out massive precision strikes on the three key nuclear facilities in the Iranian regime: Fordo, Natanz, and Esfahan.
Iran is in flames, but this time, American B-2 bombers are roaring in the skies over Iran. It is midnight on June 21st, 2025. The B-2s, invisible as they pierce the Iranian sky, drop their full bomb load on the heart of Fordo Mountain. The steel dome of Natanz cracks with 5 successive shockwaves. Underground enrichment galleries in Isfahan are blown up as if by a giant bellows and scattered into the air. Minutes later, the President of the United States posted those shocking words on Truth Social. We have successfully completed our attack on 3 nuclear facilities in Iran, including Fordo, Natanz, and Esfahan. 3 nuclear targets, direct hits. Now it's time for peace. The same statement turned Tehran's sleep into flames, Tel Aviv's fog into victory cries, and Beijing's diplomatic chambers into a deafening silence. The first 4K footage of the explosion on social media triggered claims of a low-yield tactical nuclear strike. The Pentagon remained silent, but Iranian state television shouted that the enemy bomb payload was nuclear caliber. And the question on everyone's mind was the same. How did the attack happen, and was the nuclear threshold really crossed to blow up the world's deepest bunker? Let's start with the operation. The tanker crew over the South Pacific was the first to notice the route of the Ghost Fleet that took off from Guam while the sky was still dark. During the refueling process, a single code was repeated: MOP-32. This is the most advanced version of a 13,600 kilogram bunker buster bomb. Before dawn, the American media ran headlines about ghosts in the sky. European diplomatic channels confirmed that the B-2s had taken off, but the coordinates were kept secret. The target was unclear, and additional B-2s may have been secretly deployed to strike the targets. Other aircraft may also have been involved, but B-2s, carrying 30,000-pound GBU-57B massive ordnance penetrator MOP bunker buster bombs, are seen as the only easily available conventional option to target the deep-buried enrichment facility at Fordo, especially outside of a ground assault. The U.S. attack came a day after Trump said he was still considering his options, but that his previous 2-week deadline for Iran to end its nuclear program was the maximum amount of time he would give. Israel had been tearing apart Iran's air defenses for a week, scattering Patriot PAC-3 launchers across the field like smoke bombs, while a fleet of F-35Is blinded radar centers. But the real fortification was Fordo, rock chambers dug 68 meters below ground, covered with layers of concrete and steel. Analysts, who had been listening closely to Washington for days, said, "The only thing in the world that can penetrate that is either a 30,000-pound MOP or a low-kiloton nuclear warhead." And suddenly, Trump appeared on the screens and announced, "We have dropped a full payload on Fordo. Our planes are returning safely." The same message included the phrase, "Now is the time for peace." But Iran's response was not peaceful. The Qum provincial government said, "Air defenses have been activated. The enemy target has been hit," as the sound of explosions drowned out the voices of prayer. The first satellite photos leaked at 4 in the morning. Fordo's eastern gallery was still spewing smoke, and the metal door of the entrance tunnel appeared to be lifted into the air. Thermal cameras showed red and white flashes in the heat island beneath the ground, indicating that the concrete layer was burning from the inside out. Nuclear experts wrote 2 scenarios. Either the MOP strike scattered uranium into the lower layer, or a low-yield nuclear warhead escalated the strike. The Iranian state agency IRNA's first bulletin included the following sentence: "Air defense systems have been activated in the province of Qum, and enemy targets have been hit." This was followed by the statement that part of Fordo had been affected by the attack. The official statement was brief, but the fate of the 3% stockpile of enriched uranium stored underground was unclear. The Farayan Newhall complex in Natanz and the UCF node in Isfahan were also under smoke. Satellite images reached Reuters in the early hours of the morning, showing a red heat island with a center temperature of 350 degrees. Air defense missiles exploded in the capital Tehran at 02:44, shattering the city's silence with 3 separate shock waves. The people heard sirens for the first time since the 1980-88 war. The second statement issued by the Revolutionary Guard's headquarters in the early hours of the morning said, "We have detected enemy elements, and we reserve the right to respond in full." But as the ground shook beneath Fordo's concrete shell, classic plans for a full-scale response seemed futile, as the facility's depth was modeled on Iran's most powerful bunkers. Trump's statement that now is a time for peace was met with nervous murmurs in the streets of Tehran. Foreign Ministry spokesman Ismail Baqai appeared before cameras hours later and said, "Any American intervention is an invitation to all-out war in the region." But the strategic picture in the region suggests that most of Iran's usual tools for retaliation have already been neutralized in the past week. On June 14th, Israeli air forces struck the Shahed infrastructure near Hamadan, seriously damaging Iran's air defenses. With the US stepping in, the remaining critical nodes were severed overnight. Thus, Iran's deterrence doctrine based on a combination of missiles and UAVs was suddenly left hanging in the air. The reaction within the Pentagon focused more on the technical aspects. The B-2 Spirit fleet's combined flight with MOP-32 passed through the black box section of Iran's air defense network without the need for electronic warfare support. This shows that the stealth profile is still working at full capacity. Now, experts are looking for answers to the question of whether low-yield tactical nuclear warheads were used on the brink of an attack. Official bodies are silent, but claims that the third pair of B-2s returning to Guam underwent a radiological sweep procedure have appeared on social media accounts. The Pentagon did not deny this claim, merely stating that post-flight radiation protocol is standard. Nevertheless, many consider this to be the first act in the official nuclear denial process. After the attacks, the main question is whether Iran will retaliate, and how. If Iran attacks US bases in the region, this could significantly escalate the conflict. An attempt to close the Strait of Hormuz is also a possibility. What is unknown is how Iran's command and control architecture works, and whether additional capabilities have been deployed to weaken it in order to make it more difficult for the US to mount a major response. Tehran, meanwhile, is racing against time to develop counter-move scenarios. The Revolutionary Guard's primary options include mining tanker traffic in the Gulf, launching ballistic missiles with proxy forces along the Iraq-Syria axis, and stirring up its branches in Lebanon and Yemen. But Israeli-US defense cooperation is based on the latest version of the multi-layered missile shield deployed in the Gulf in recent years. The Patriot PX-3 MSE, THAAD, Aegis Ashore, David's Sling, and Iron Dome chain can stop Iran's Shahab-3 and Ahmed-class missiles with over 70% success. The Haviza cruise stockpile, which seeks longer ranges, is risky due to Israel's ballistic cruise hybrid intercept doctrine, as the first salvo could fail, closing the logistical window for a potential second salvo. The US has evacuated many of its personnel, aircraft, and ships from its bases in the Persian Gulf. But these are still potential targets and could draw a response from their host countries if attacked. Another important factor to consider is that although Israel has reduced Iran's long-range ballistic missile capabilities in the last week, no launches have been made in the last 24 hours, which is an initial and potential indicator of the state of these forces. Iran's short-range ballistic and cruise missile capabilities, and its one-way attack unmanned aerial vehicle capabilities, are much broader and more difficult to target. These systems pose a major threat to US bases in the region. In this context, Iran may return to its strategic patience card. But domestic political pressure is prompting the streets and councils to call for urgent retaliation. There are many unknowns at this point. The first political reaction from Washington came from House Speaker Mike Johnson. "The president means what he says. Let this be a reminder to our adversaries." Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders, meanwhile, called the attack, carried out without congressional approval, completely unconstitutional. While the majority of Democrats pointed to the risk of a ground operation, Republican hawks praised the move as a strategic necessity that erases the shadow of the Obama era. Congress is expected to be called into emergency session, but amid the debate over war powers, the White House is referring to a limited and terminal mission template. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu congratulated Trump in a video released Sunday morning, calling it a courageous decision that will change history. Israel has long viewed Iran's enrichment capacity as a security threat, racing against time. Tel Aviv's said suppression of enemy air defenses, sorties over the past 10 days have systematically disabled Iranian radar and missile batteries, and the US B-2 sortie has made this damage permanent. The Gulf monarchies in the region remain cautious. Saudi Arabia and the UAE have not yet issued official congratulatory messages, but private sources report that Riyadh has begun lobbying within OPEC Plus to put the price of oil barrels on a controlled rise chart. The international market opened Brent at $88 in the morning and tested $96 within hours. This is because Fordo and Natanz were not only nuclear facilities, but also energy arteries, feeding complexes linked to the country's fertilizer, petrochemical, and heavy water supply chains. Wall Street and the Chicago Board of Trade pushed wheat contracts up 8%, while the Doha LNG spot market pushed barrel equivalents up 6%. The geopolitical risk premium is not limited to crude oil. Southern Iraqi ports, Basra tanker insurance, and container freight rates out of Hormuz also saw sudden increases. Financial indicators shifted to long-term risk pricing. Citi decided to reduce its Middle East asset portfolio with a regional shock signal note. JP Morgan shared a $115 ceiling scenario for Brent. Pavilion, an LNG trader in Singapore, closed Asian spot cargo with an 11% premium. ULSD diesel contracts jumped 6%. European Rotterdam port prices closed with a $3 margin. In food contracts, Chicago wheat, the Egyptian cotton index, and Kuala Lumpur palm oil are currently seeing speculative gains. This rally is sustainable as Fordo's fertilizer supply chain has been disrupted. The repercussions of this economic turmoil will also affect Turkey and the Caucasus corridor. The queue of Iranian-Turkish trucks at the Gerbalak border crossing has lengthened because Isfahan petrochemical products account for 12% of the plastic raw material market in Istanbul. Azerbaijan-Georgia port routes are repricing transit routes through the Caspian Sea. Spot gas quotas on the Armenian Energy Exchange traded at a 14% premium. These are all the first shockwaves of a bombardment that blew in overnight. The strategic intelligence community, however, is pursuing a different question. If the tactical nuclear weapons claim is true, has NATO's nuclear threshold doctrine been damaged? Since the 1950s, the literature on nuclear deterrence has defined nuclear weapons as a last resort. But the concept of low-kiloton flexible warheads has found its way into both US and Russian military doctrine over the past decade as a means of delivering a limited strike against strategic targets. When the Pentagon added the W-76-2 low-yield warhead to its 2018 nuclear posture review, it emphasized flexible deterrence. If the warhead that exploded over Fordo tonight is indeed the W-76-2, then that doctrine has moved from paper to the battlefield. In other words, nuclear taboos have de facto cracked. Even if this claim is not confirmed, the deep rock layer explosion effect of MOP-32 could visually resemble a nuclear detonation, and the perception war is already serving its intended purpose on the ground: to impose on the Iranian people the feeling that no facility underground is safe. In terms of propaganda, this perception is a psychological whip much more powerful than the steel walls of uranium plants. As a final step, it is useful to look at the U.S. force deployment in the Middle East to understand how many stages the official plan is divided into. 2 of the 5 air units within the CENTCOM chain of command are already in the Gulf. 2 aircraft carriers are at the exit of the Red Sea until their mission is complete. Therefore, the only area requiring reinforcement is the MQ-9 drone fleet and tanker line. Trump has said he will not send ground troops, but if the risk of a counterattack grows, the possibility of temporarily deploying Marine Corps elements to the Kuwait-Bahrain axis is on the table. Such a fortification may not give Iran's proxy forces the ability to strike and flee. On the contrary, it means the risk of long-term patrols. Domestically, the debate over who will pay the bill has already heated up. Although Tehran's options are limited, the cyber arms of the Revolutionary Guards could increase DDoS attacks on NATO banking networks, and Stuxnet-like scenarios targeting Saudi Aramco's infrastructure are back on the agenda. The U.S. Cyber Command has activated an Orange Defense Posture Alert. The banking, energy, and transportation sectors will remain on cyber alert for a month. Here is where we stand. On one side of the scale are the concrete shells of Fordo, Natanz, and Isfahan. On the other, the fog surrounding whether or not the nuclear threshold has been crossed. But even behind the fog, 2 stark realities are visible. 1. Iran's nuclear program is facing its most significant physical damage to date. 2. This move has raised the risk of all-out war in the region to levels not seen since the 2006 Lebanon crisis. Whether or not the tactical nuclear claim is confirmed, fear, price, diplomacy, and propaganda have all gained momentum. How will the global political stage manage this rupture? Will Washington's perfect operation fanfare echo at the UN podium as new global nuclear lawlessness? If Iran's response options run out, will nuclear uncertainty add polish to the Russia-China axis? Or will everyone retreat to their own red lines? How many more days can the Middle East's energy arteries withstand naval insurance premiums? And the most burning question, does this limited victory truly pave the way for peace? Or is it the silent harbinger of a deeper storm? Where do you see this challenge heading? Share your thoughts in the comments. If you enjoyed our analysis, don't forget to like the video, subscribe, and turn on notifications. The echoes of the next explosion could reach beyond your own borders.